in the child aspect, the religious, the spiritual aspect, it's not the Vatican. No religious kind of religion. This is probably going to confuse a lot of you. Once again, we're time jumping and teleporting around everywhere. Let's see what's going to happen in a minute. Anyway, I think the reason why this is happening is because the last video I did, well, the last time I recorded this part, I realised I was essentially going over the same old stuff that I've done before, and most of you know it already and are probably sick and tired of me saying, oh, we're talking about it. Likewise, I'm going to be slightly repeating myself again here, because something that has to be addressed. And I keep getting asked about, and even though I explain, people still ask about it. And that's the Israel question, the Jewish question. Why aren't they all Jewish? Well, because they're not. Never have been. People at the top have never been Jewish. Even the Sassoons, who you could sort of slightly consider Jewish, aren't Jewish. They're Edomite, Arabs. Which is something else that people get wrong as well. People keep going on about Ashkenazi being the Edomites of the Bible. Again, that's not true. That was something that was made up by the Jesuits. The Catholic Church. In fact, it's been there in front of everyone's faces who the Edomites are. Because they tell you quite often. In fact, the entirety of the Old Testament is essentially the several sort of run-ins that Judeans had with the Edomites, with the Edomite tribes. One of which was the Philistines. The Edomites have always been Arab. Herod was an Edomite, was an Arab. The Pharisees and the Sadducees of the Jewish temples were Arab. They were just forcibly bundled in with the rest of the Jewish tribes when the Romans invaded Judea and Samaria. The Ashkenazi are Jewish. Not a lot of people like that either. But they are. Many people start shouting about the Khazarian mafia. The Khazars were wiped out when the Turks invaded. And all the ones that tried to flee fled to the nearest kingdom that was closest, basically. That was Wallachia. Every single one of them that arrived at the Wallachian border were all killed. Likewise, when they fled the other way to try and get into the Cossack regions of Russia, again, they were all killed. They all died at the end of the sword. We know they're all dead because DNA testing of the remains of the Khazars that we could find don't match anybody. No one living. No race living anyway. Because Aryan Mafia is a myth. Another degenerate sort of idea. Ashkenazi are Ashkenazi. They're Jewish. They're still Jewish. Yes, they've got Eastern European blood inside them, but that's because a lot of them married, surprise, surprise, Eastern Europeans. They're also blanketed over the rest of the Jewish people that are actually in that area, in Israel. Most people consider the Ashkenazis the Jews that are there, saying that no, the Jews ever lived there, and didn't live there before Palestine, and blah blah blah. That's fucking. The Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews have been there since time immemorial. They look like Arabs. Most people mistake them for Arabs, but they're not. They're Jews. Jesus was probably Mizrahi or Sephardic. This is why the Romans didn't distinguish between the Edomites and the Judean tribes, because they both look the same. They both look so fucking similar. So the Assassins are Arabs, the Edomites. They've also been in the priest class for, well, since the time of Jesus, before the time of Jesus. Their bloodline links back to that those Edomites that became Pharisees and Sadducees have always been priests. One way you can tell that the Sassoons are Arabs is look at the relatives of theirs. Ayatollah Khomeini is a Sassoon, part of the Sassoon line. Mohammed bin Salman is part of the Sassoon line. King of Jordan, whose name escapes me at the moment, Sassoon. Qataris, Sassoon. Bahrain's Sassoon. Yes, they're Muslim. Yes, they're Arabs. So are the fucking Sassoons, morons. Most of what you see against the Jews, against Israel, some of it, yeah, they've done because they're not unwilling participants, to be fair. But the vast majority of it is bollocks. Again, it's that 95% truth, 10% lies bit. Can't escape it. Can't escape it. It literally applies to everything, including all that propaganda that comes out about the Jewish people in Israel. Some of it's true, yeah, quite a bit. But not all of it. It's the bits that matter that aren't.
If you follow me on Telegram, you'll have, or even on Twitter, yeah, or even seen me post on here, you'll have seen a picture of, well, 4 or 5 pictures of a guy, and I said, who's this guy? Identify who this guy is, and you start to realise quite a lot of how this system works. That is Prince Charles Borden and his wife Camilla Borden of Corsica, yeah, and the 3 Sicilies. They are the lower branch of the Picer family, and they tie into the Orsini, who are the consiglieri, in a way, the Great Pope, and into the other papal families. Here's the reason why we have Prince Charles, well, we have King Charles and Camilla, Queen Camilla, because again, Our Royal Windsors are a smokescreen for them. And in the next episode, we're going to go deeper into the obfuscation as well. Why they use scapegoats and so many distractions and fake leads. Anyway, thanks for watching.
I know you probably expected me to have gone by now. But there's something I wanted to, well, I thought I needed to add. Many of you won't agree at all with anything that I've said. In fact, the fact that the Jews aren't involved will be your immediate breaking point. You're likely angrily putting something in the comments. This isn't an idea that's been born out of, you check the description, you'll find an absolute cave of links to my Telegram PDF library that goes into great lengths to show the documentation to back up what I say. Everything that I tell you can be backed up. You'll notice with me that when I speculate, I tell you. Or when there's something I know for certain, but I've no real way of proving it, I won't tell you it. At the moment, certain elements, shall we say, that are within the actual system at the apex are moving around quite a lot, showing the faces more in public, letting people see who they are, learn the names, discover them and find them online. They're doing this on purpose. You see, their goal is pretty much complete. And you're beginning to see, well, we have been for the last decade, the culmination of that plan. The scapegoats are starting to be bumped off because they're no longer needed. One of those scapegoats, the Rothschilds that everyone seems to point to, has in the last decade lost 4 of its most prominent members of that family. One of them being Nicholas, who ran their holding firm, which then immediately closed their asset holding firm. After that there was Evelyn, then there was Jacob, who was probably most famous, and then there was Richard last year, towards the end of last year in fact, who died in California, had his home in a fire where his body was found at the front door. Seems like the hitman that was used may have knackered up a little bit. Yeah? You see, something that is very little known regarding the Rothschilds is for the past decade, alongside those prominent members dying off, been quietly selling off their assets, closing down their, I suppose you could call public-facing bank, yeah? Closing down the branches, trying to generate money, generate cash flow, because they're broke. Like I said, their usefulness has ended, as has a fair few other institutions as well. Yeah, mate. It's not only the Rothschild Bank that is going down, thus disproving quite a lot of what's been said about them. It's not only them. BlackRock is another often flaunted bastion of conspiracy bankingship. They just had the credit cancelled, their business credit cancelled, which isn't good, because its owners have decided it's no longer needed. Its owners being the Pisces. You look at who owns BlackRock, who owns the controlling share. That's Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch is the investment banking arm of Bank of America. Bank of America was founded and is owned by the Pisces family. They own Vanguard. No one can figure out who's invested in Vanguard because they don't release that list. The private financiers. Yeah, the private financiers, because it's the personal investment sort of brokers for the Pisces. If you look at Vanguard, it's Vanguard Group. Vanguard Group is split into several different entities across the world: Shanghai, London, New York, Berlin, Frankfurt, and each of them has their another sort of subsidiary inside them. Vanguard Tech, Vanguard Fuels, Vanguard Green, which is the green energy sort of thing, and so on and so forth. But the actual umbrella above it, Vanguard, not Vanguard Financial or Vanguard Investment, just Vanguard, is where the Pisces money comes in, and it's from there that the money flow comes. I've said this before. Wallenberg AB is another one. The Wallenbergs are incredibly sort of important, but they are part of the Charlemagne clique. Yeah, them and the Ruzaf are integrally tied together. Integrally, they're pretty much almost one and the same. And the Pisces, like I said, are at the top of that pyramid. Are the head of the Merovingian bloodline, Carolingian bloodline. Yeah? They represent all of them. Yeah? All of the ones in the 13th family. Everyone below that, in that lesser royalty, lesser nobility, right, that I mentioned before, is the front-facing face of the regime. Yeah? Who you're meant to stop at and not progress any further. I've seen people talking about the Spanish Habsburgs, the The other Habsburgs, the Dutch royal family, so on and so forth. Yeah. Yes, the royals, but they're not part of that same line, not anymore. Some of them never were to begin with. I didn't really go into it here, but the royal lineages of Europe are incredibly complex. Yeah. But the one thing you need to remember overall out of everything is that the Carolingian line is divine. They are seen as divine kings. An excellent example of this is Louis XIV. He's called the Sun King for damn good reason. Again, that divine bloodline all over again. Like I said, next time we're going to go into these diversionary families, the power that they hold, because they still hold a lot of power, even though they're a diversionary tactic. And the other diversions, the organisations that are diversions. I'm not going to go through them all, but I'm going to teach you how to identify them so you can find them yourself. Because once you know what to look for and where to look, you'll uncover a great deal. Anyway, once again, like, share, subscribe, you know the drill. I'll see you later.